all learn a lot from her today. For the benefit of newcomers, I will give a brief history of Arab World Books before I hand over the floor to Mohammed and Susan. My name is Amani. All my life, I appreciated books. So 23 years ago, in March 98, like I said, I thought the internet would be a great opportunity to pay tribute to the writers who have enriched my life. I created this website, which is dedicated to enhance understanding between different cultures. And I am most proud that over the years, Arab World Books has become a destination for researchers and centers of Arab studies around the globe. The mission of the website is to highlight the ideas, the books, and the women and men who create them. Therefore, the core of the website has always been the author bios, their books, as well as the writings. And of course, the writings make up an e-zine that we have online. Around the year 2001, we started two main programs, the Writers Workshop and the Book Club, both running now for 20 years. In the Book Club, we have featured a book every month, and we published a special file about the author and their work, and discussions were conducted online. The books were a mixture of fiction and non-fiction, mainly recent books. Files and discussions can be found online in our Book of the Month archive. Lately, as book clubs have become more prevalent in the Arab world, we have focused on international literary masterpieces, like the works of Albert Camus, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Günter Grass, books that have the potential to broaden one's horizon. Tonight, we have the third episode of a new series, A Writer, a Vision, a Journey. This series of in-depth conversations with Arab and international authors aim to explore the motivation, process, and outcomes of a writer's journey, and hopefully shed some light on the values and experiences that are common to writers and readers across the world. Our guest tonight is Susan Tiberghien. Egyptian author Mohammed Tawfiq will host and moderate the discussion. Thank you all for participating and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amani. Before starting the conversation,
Mohammed, you are not on. Voila.
Okay, I've done that. Thank you very much. Before starting the conversation, I will make a brief introduction of Susan for the benefit of some of our colleagues who are not acquainted with all of her work. Susan Tiberghien is an American-born writer living in Geneva. She holds a BA in Literature and Philosophy and did graduate work at the Université de Grenoble and the C.G. Jung Institute of Zurich. She has published a number of memoirs, Looking for Gold, Circling to the Center, 1 Year to Writing Life, Side by Side, Writing Your Love Story, Footsteps in Love with a Frenchman, and of course, numerous essays in journals and anthologies on both sides of the Atlantic. Ms. Tiberghien teaches and lectures at graduate programs at C.G. Jung Centers and at writers' conferences, both in the States and in Europe. She has taught at the International Women's Writing Guild, Summer Conference at Skidmore, the Hudson Valley Writers Center, Bethesda Writers Center, the Bethesda Writers Center, Grub Street, Boston, and the Muse and the Marketplace. She founded the Geneva Writers Group in 1993. Of course, I'm a student of Susan's. I've been a member of that group for many years, which she continues to direct and where she teaches monthly workshops. The GWG brings together 230 English language writers for workshops readings, salons, and networking. She's the founding editor of the literary review Offshoots, writing from Geneva. Since 1998, she directs the Writers Conference with over 200 writers from around the world. In Paris, she has taught at the Paris Writers Workshop, given workshops at Shakespeare and Company, Village Voice, and the American Library. She has also given workshops in Brussels, Luxembourg, Basel, and Bern. She's founding member of the International Writers Residence at the Chateau. Lavigny, where I was lucky enough to spend a few weeks there, where each summer 30 writers from around the world are welcomed for 3-week sessions. She's married with 6 grown children, some of which are here with us tonight, and 15 wonderful grandchildren. And in her bio, she mentions that her husband and children are also wonderful. Welcome, Susan. It's a great pleasure to see you. It's a great pleasure to have this opportunity to have a conversation with you. And I think it's a fantastic opportunity for people from around the world to get to know you. Susan, what motivates you to write? At what point in your life did you decide and said, I am going to be a writer. I am a writer.
Mohammed, just before I try to answer that, if people have come on recently, you see my name with my husband's name because my computer, the audio was not working on it. So you see me as if I'm Pierre-Yves, my husband, and you see my husband as if he is Susan. Then I want also to thank Amani and Mohammed. I haven't seen you for a while. Last time I was in Washington. And it's just, I'm very grateful to have this chance to talk to all of you, to share my love of writing and to just to share what I have discovered, which has given me a richer life, a deeper life through writing. Mohammed asked me, I'm not used to my husband's computer. Am I looking at you now as I look at this camera? Yes?
Yes.
Yes, okay. It's a new computer for me, so I just wasn't certain where to try to focus. What motivates me to write is the desire to discover myself and the world around me, the world in which I live. To discover who I am and where I am living. It is also to share stories, to share ideas, to share what I have reaped from years. I am 86. I started writing full time when I was 50. That gives me 36 years of writing, 36 years of deepening my life and wanting to share it. Mohammed, I think you also asked, when did I think that I was when did I want to be a writer? It was when I turned 50. Bring you up to date quickly. After my studies in America, I went to Grenoble, University of Grenoble for graduate work, which opened my eyes to another way of living and opened my heart to a Frenchman. We married and we settled in Europe. Back to 1950, when I went to my first writing workshop. Not 1950, 1984. I was 50 years old. 1984, I decided that I wanted to go back to my mother tongue. Having fallen in love with a Frenchman, married, moved to Europe, moved around Europe, different countries, Belgium, Italy, Switzerland, France, back to Switzerland, 6 children. It was time for me to find who I was. And so I went to a writing workshop, and stories poured out of me. I was back to my mother tongue. I wanted to be a writer. 1985, I came back to Geneva. It was a 2-week workshop. And I joined the American Women's Club in Geneva and started to lead the writing workshop there. And in 5 years of teaching at the American Women's Club, of writing stories, publishing some, getting many rejections, I finally could say I am a writer. But it's a tough question, Mohammed. We always say, oh, I write, but I'm not a writer. But I am a writer. And it is my life, along with my children and friends and everything else.
That's a fantastic way to start this conversation, Susan. So you mentioned 2 elements. Let me just. You mentioned 2 elements, Susan. The element of writing to discover yourself, and the element of working with others in the writing process. So how does that work? How do you balance between the solitary business of writing on the one hand, and the collective business, the collective spirit of working with others? How does that work for you, Susan?
When I came back from that workshop in America, 1984, I was 50. I was so inspired and informed. As I said, stories started pouring out of me, stories of living around Europe, bringing up all these children, everything that I was encountering, that I wanted to share it. So that took me right away to where I knew there was a writing workshop at the American Women's Club of Geneva. And I led that group for 10 years. We'll get to the Geneva Writers Group soon, because that was 93. I'm back in 1985. So Mohammed, the teaching came because of the inspiration that I received when I gave myself the privilege to write and to go to a writing workshop. At that moment, I discovered that I love teaching. I love teaching almost as much as writing. And I think the teaching is my way of sharing. So the 2 go together. And the teaching feeds into my writing. I think that when we teach, we really learn. I can remember back in high school, teaching some of my friends a history lesson or a math lesson. Well, the next day, I just knew the lesson almost backwards. I think when we teach, we learn what we're teaching. So the 2 played together, Mohammed, for me, and gave structure and depth to each other. And that collective spirit that I get from a group gives me energy. Even on a Zoom screen, even seeing all of you on a Zoom screen, I feel a togetherness.
Fantastic. Talking about togetherness, you are American born, married to a Frenchman, based in Geneva. So basically, you live in a multicultural world, and obviously you have expressed that in many different ways in footsteps and side by side. You share some fascinating insights into this journey. Can you share with our participants some of these aspects of your personal life, your personal journey, uh, your contact with the world, and how all that has come together in your writing?
I think when I decided back in New York, where I grew up, after university to go to Grenoble, I didn't realize that I was deciding to choose another culture. And as I said, at the University of Grenoble, I fell in love with a French student. We have been married now 62 years, which has been amazing and a blessing. In the early part of our marriage, Pierre was doing his military service. I'm going to go to one of the stories, Mohammed. I'm just thinking how to get there. And we were in southern France. Mohammed mentioned the book Footsteps. Footsteps is a collection of stories that I wrote first as stories. This is interesting because I wrote them as short stories. And they were published at that time in a magazine, a monthly magazine of the London Financial Times. And then I saw that they were really personal essays. What is the difference between a short story and a personal essay? That's another subject for another Zoom gathering. So though all these stories afterwards were published as personal essays for the Christian Science Monitor in America. And I put them together in the book Footsteps, Falling in Love with a Frenchman. We were in southern France, in a little village, Istres. He was doing his military service. I was the only American. In fact, I was the only foreigner. So I was plunged into French and into a French milieu, everything. I had a next door neighbor. And the story I wanted to mention from Footsteps from that period in France is called Spécialité Provençale. It's the first story that I wrote that was published in America. It's about my next door neighbor, about, I thought, her transforming herself because she had this naive American young woman neighbor. She had never seen an American. But I realized afterwards that it was my transformation. The story is Spécialité Provençale. I was becoming a French housewife, a French mother. So that's one story that's in Footsteps. And from France, we went to Belgium, to Brussels, where Pierre worked for the Common Market. This is the beginning of the European Commission. So from the culture of France, I then was immersed in the European cultures. And one story from that period is called Remember. We were giving an exhibit to an American painter. His work was put on the walls of our apartment. And we had invited many friends in Brussels, including an ambassador from the Ivory Coast. It was the night of the assassination of JFK. People telephoned to us from the embassy at 7 o'clock or 7:30. To see the emotion that this ambassador had made me aware of the universality of our emotions. It made me aware that we are one family. That was when we were living in Brussels. From Brussels, we went to Italy. There's stories from Italy. I don't know how much time we still have. I don't want to keep talking about stories. From Italy, we went to Switzerland. Let me give a story from Footsteps that is from Switzerland. When we arrived in Switzerland, there was a referendum. They were deciding whether to limit the number of foreigners in Switzerland. The story is called Swiss Scaffolds because there was scaffolding on our apartment building. Swiss scaffolds, keeping us straight. The Italian workmen were there. We were not we were also foreigners. The Italian workmen were doing all the balconies on the scaffolds. We talked, we were all speaking Italian after 4 years in Italy. When the referendum took place, they voted to not put a limit on the number of foreigners. And we celebrated together. It was diversity. It was the internationalism of Switzerland, of Geneva. And to reach out, Mohammed mentioned also Side by Side, a memoir of a long marriage. And in Side by Side, I talk often about the adoption of our 6th child from Vietnam. The details are woven in and out of this memoir. His arrival at the airport, 1974. He was born in 72. It was the last year of the war in Vietnam. His sitting on the floor in the small room that we had for him, in an orange jumpsuit, surrounded by 5 brothers and sisters the day after his arrival. His nightmares every night for 3 months, not being able to sleep, his world turned inside out. We had brought diversity into our family. So how fortunate I am to now live in Geneva, where Switzerland has become my second home.
Fantastic. Earlier on, you talked about language and your mother tongue and the link between language and your writing persona. And now you're talking about diversity and different cultures coming together. How does language fit into all this? How does mother tongue work out with the other languages that are this cacophony of languages that are coming at you all the time? How do you manage this?
As I mentioned, when we were married and moved to France, we started living in French, and we continued. We did learn Italian when we were in Italy. I thought I had lost my mother tongue. So when I went to that workshop at the age 50 and decided I wanted to be a writer, I went back to English. And people used to say that I was writing this beautiful, concise English with very few words. Well, it's really because I had lost so many words. I had lost my vocabulary. I had been reading in French, so I had a lot of catching up to do. And I think that now English, American English, is the bedrock of my writing. I have written in French. I never tried to write in Italian. I was speaking it, but I did not write in it. American English, I did say, because it is adaptable. There's no American Academy like the French Academy. Nobody's telling me whether it's proper English or not English if I invent a word. It represents American English, all the multitudes of people who have come to America. So it represents the way I write, it represents who I am. That's how I feel about my language, and the place that goes with language is Geneva, where I have mentioned how grateful I am to be in this multicultural city, dedicated to peacemaking. My grandmother left Switzerland for America in 1896, my maternal grandmother. So I have come back.
Oh, that's fantastic. I mean, there's listening to explain all these elements is fascinating, because when reading your works, there's always a fluidity there, and sometimes a delicious element of deception. So, for example, 1 year to a writing life starts off as an artisan's manual, then almost imperceptibly embarks on an exploration of the source of a writer's inspiration. If we look at the circling to the center or looking for gold, uh, at one point one is struck by the profundity of the work. It's about the different levels of existence. It's about how one's psyche is built up. Uh, so where does this come from? Does this come from Jung? Does this come from your different life experiences? Is it an easy process? Does it just flow? Is it something that you have to fight with? How does it work for Susan Tiberghien?
I think I was fortunate to be born happy and to be born wanting always to deepen the source of that happiness, to find it, to find my soul. As a child, I spent a long time alone, walking, playing in the fields alone, and often sitting on a rock and talking to God at that point. This feeling that there's something in me, a source of love, I have been able to nourish all my life. Through school, through university, studying literature and philosophy. Afterwards, in bringing up these children in Europe, I was very often working in a parish, working in a school, trying to show people that love holds us together. And I feed this through my work, my Jungian work. And that came about at the same time, C.G. Jung, as my desire to be a writer. Back to 1985, 50, coming back from America, I went to a course at the parish where we were members. And it was a Jungian priest on Jungian spirituality. And from there, I started going up to Zurich, to Kusnacht, to the Institute at Kusnacht for classes, for the intensive. I started reading C.G. Jung, studying C.G. Jung. I read a great deal, I study a great deal. And when I study, I take notes. And I found strength in what I was reading for my life and for the way I could relate to people. Jung gave me a way of bringing together the different roles in my life, mother, friend, teacher, writer, and to look for one person, to find that wholeness that we talk about. That's the title of one of my most recent books, Writing Toward Wholeness, to bring the different threads of my life together. So I deepen this source, or I go into it through prayer. I have a prayer practice, through Jungian work, through reading, and for being in love with life and with my husband and with my children and my friends.
Mm-hmm. Well, in a second, we'll open this up for general discussion. But there's one last thing I want to ask you. You're a citizen of the world, so you feel at home anywhere, and you follow whatever is happening around the globe. So what are the issues that you feel more strongly about? And what role do you think that an influential writer like yourself should be playing in the large issues and the important issues facing humankind today?
I think all of us, whether we're writers or not, we have a responsibility. We have been given a life. We have a responsibility to give back what we can, what we have received. Especially writers, we're working with the word. So we have a responsibility to take our voices into the world. I'm an active member here in Switzerland of the French-speaking International PEN chapter. PEN was founded in 1921 to bring together the writers of the world for mutual cooperation, for the defense of the freedom of expression. Take my voice into the world. And often in teaching, I go back to Nadine Gordimer in 1991, her Nobel Prize. She said that any writer of any worth hopes to play a pocket torch of light into the beautiful, into the bloody but beautiful labyrinth of being.
Mm.
Any writer of any worth hopes to play a pocket torch of light into the bloody but beautiful labyrinth of being. We want to shine this light. And this takes me to C.G. Jung, his dream, it's in Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, a young adult. He writes, "It was night. I was in an unknown place. I was making slow progress against a mighty wind. My hands were cupped around a little light. I knew I had to keep that light alive." And this is our responsibility. We have that light. Shine it into the labyrinth of being. Keep it alive. Our responsibility as writers. Shine that light. And I go up to today, and I think of Amanda Gorman, who gave her poem, Climbing the Hill, at the inauguration of President Biden. In her poem, she writes, "For there is always light, if we are brave enough to see it, if we are brave enough to be it."
Mm. Fantastic, beautiful, Susan. I think it's probably time for us to open up the floor. Since we have quite a few people around today, if anyone wants to make a comment or ask a question, I'd appreciate it if you could just raise your hand. There is a function in which you can use to raise your hand, and if you don't know the function, you can just raise your hand like this, as Hala just did. So I'll see you. And so since Hala raised her hand, first of all, let's hear it from Hala. If you can please unmute, we can't hear you because the mic is muted. Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's good. That's good, Hala. We can hear you.
Okay, because I'm sorry because I have something here. I want to ask you, you started writing at 50. What is the difference between you and a writer who started 20 or less? In your opinion, of course.
Perhaps the writer who starts earlier would be more, would have more than 6 or 7 books. I'm not certain. I don't want to be, I want to think about this question seriously, because I was always writing.
Yeah.
Notes, letters, papers. I can't read a book without scribbling in the margin. It was only when I turned 50 that I gave myself the time to become a writer, to work full-time as a writer. I think I had the benefit at that time of an experience, incredible experience of bringing up 6 kids in 5 or 6 different countries, of this love affair with a Frenchman, of studying at everything that I was doing was material for me to write. And it all came together at that age, which it could not have done it in the 20s. I could not have had the spiritual deepening that I had. I could not have had the Jungian studies. I could not have had all this experience of being a mother. And I brought it all together in the writing. It's fine. It's the writing that pulled all the threads together.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly, there's no time wasted living when you're a writer. Every moment lived becomes part of the work. Okay, anyone else want to make a comment, have a question? Okay, I have Mahmoud. Mahmoud, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Your Excellency. I'd like to thank Mr. Tawfiq and the Arab World Books Forum staff for arranging this interview. I'd like also to thank Susan for attending this interview and enriching it with her views. Congratulations also on the bestseller you have, which is 1 year to a writing life. I made my homework and just read about your biography. So hopefully, since you are interested in teaching and giving back society, hopefully you can make the content of the book in other format like PowerPoint presentations or something like this, in order to be used in workshops. Because as I think it's a practical book, as I can. I didn't read it. I just read some some excerpts from the Google Books. So I think it's a practical book. So if you can make it in another format like PowerPoint presentation chunks to be used in the creative writing workshops. Also, you might want to consider translation to Arabic, hopefully. My question here is, because I write, I didn't publish all my work, but I write already, especially essays. I'd like to ask you, because life is here. I'm talking about the Arab world here, or here in Egypt, that life is harsh on some writers. On the other hand, it's very good and it's paradise for other writers. So I just want to ask you, yes.
Where?
Yeah, I just want to ask you, in terms of publishing the work, the artwork, okay? You can have a high quality content, okay, but no one would want to, to endeavor printing it, maybe because it does not go with the trend or not according to people's taste, something like this. So, and by the way, the publisher may ask you to make major changes in order to consider giving it a place in the publishing queue. So would a writer, from your point of view, of course, would a writer yield, or I mean, give up in order to come to terms with the market, or just keep on looking for more supportive publishers? I'm talking especially on op-ed essays, because I like writing this kind of essays, and some publishers may have very severe comments on the article. How do you comment on that? Thank you very much.
Is this Mahmoud, who I don't see? This is Mahmoud Khaled who is speaking?
Yes, it's Mahmoud
Okay,
Khaled, yes.
Mahmoud, I have a hard time understanding and putting all this together, your question. I understand that you have read, or you appreciate 1 year to a writing life and the different lessons, and you appreciate, and that you have written, and now you are moving to publishing.
Yes, publishing. I
But
already.
the specific question, I'm not certain what you would like me to address. Mohammed, perhaps you can tell me?
Yes, I think he wanted to, he was expressing the difficulties that a writer faces in Egypt in getting published, and that sometimes the publishers will tell him that his writing is not attractive enough to a general public, and they will ask him to make changes. So he wanted to share your experience with that, whether it's the same in your experience or whether the grass is greener on the other side.
Publishing is difficult in every country. I was fortunate to learn about publishers by being in a writers group, by hearing the experience of others, by going to workshops, by hearing what other people were doing. When even with the London Financial Times, I didn't know about it. Was somebody in that was just short stories. It was not yet a book. My first book, Looking for Gold, I did not know that there was a Jungian publisher up in Einsiedeln in Switzerland. It was somebody in the writing association that I belonged to who told me, why don't you send your manuscript to Diamond Verlag, which is in Einsiedeln. Again, I did not know that. I was informing myself about publishing, learning about it, because I came in when I was 50. My first book published was when I was 95. No, I'm not yet 95. It was the year 95.
It's a good omen, by the way, that you will live to 95.
I was 65. It took me 15 years to get a book published. And I found that publisher because of a contact in a writing association. Then I belonged to the Authors Guild in New York City. I think that there are associations of writers that can help us find publishers. Today, it's more difficult than ever because all these different publishers have come together. There are really now 4 or 5 main big publishers. There are the independent publishers. And then we do have today the possibility of publishing ourselves. And when we find how to do this well, the book is there and is just as important as a book that is published by Hachette. So first, I would suggest to be in an association of writers in order to familiarize yourself with what possibilities there are. Read, be a professional writer in the sense of maybe International Pen or the Authors Guild. And again, this is more information coming into you. And then I have not had publishers who have asked to change my work. I've had very good editors. And I've had sympathetic experiences with the editors who are copy editing my books. Does that bring some light to this question of publishing? Mohammed could bring light also.
Yes, thank you very much. Mahmoud, is that satisfactory for you?
Yes, for me, it's okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I have tried to imitate the Geneva Writers Group in Cairo. And we have a writers group right here. And Mahmoud is one of the members of that group.
Good. I didn't talk much about the Geneva Writers Group. When I came back from that workshop that sort of changed my life and joined the American Women's Club, it's because it was the only writing group I knew of in Geneva. And so more and more people were joining that writing workshop at the American Women's Club. And I was giving workshops in the evening, both to men and women at home. And I was starting to teach in America at the International Women's Writing Guild. And I decided that it was time to bring all this together and to offer a writing group for men and women in Geneva. And that was the Geneva Writers Group that I started with friends in 1993. There were about 16, 17 of us who started that. Many of them had been coming to the American Women's Club or to my evening workshops. And that small group of 18 mushroomed and grew and grew. And as Mohammed said, they're over 200. I'm no longer directing this, Mohammed. It was in June 2 years ago that the 20th anniversary or 25th, 93, 25th anniversary of the Geneva Writers Group, June 2 years ago, I stepped down as the leader. And today it is, Slovenko, I just have I'll get back to that afterwards. There is a new steering committee, is still some who were on the steering committee when I was leading, and we do have new members, and the GWG, Geneva Writers Group, is doing all that they can during this COVID to offer programs online, and is moving forward to bring structure and ideas to its members.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I participated actually at in the conference that was held just a few months ago, and
That's
it was
right. It
quite
was
successful
online.
despite the COVID pandemic. Hoda wants to say something. Go ahead, Hoda.
Hi, Susan. I hope you can hear my voice.
Yes, I hear you. Thank you. Hello, Hoda.
Okay. Okay. Hi. It's very inspiring, everything you said. I'm inspired by the fact that it started at the age of 50, by the diversity of geography and language and everything you have lived through and put into your writing. What attracted me the most is when you're answering Muhammad's question about the language, which I'm quite interested in, the diversity of languages that you know. You said that you, for some time, you lived in French. If I'm not mistaken, you used that term, and that's a very interesting thing because I think it's so so influential into one's life. The knowledge of language, or it's different from reading books in language and learning it as a second language acquisition, in between actually living the life of that language. Which brings me to ask a little bit more on how has living in French, English, and Italian, if I counted them correctly, how is living in different languages influence your language style in writing? How to know people who are reading you come on, the universal characteristics of a language. Knowing three languages, at least living three languages, would probably mean that you have come up with the more general, more universal structure of a language. How has that influenced your choice of structure, vocabulary, and so on and so forth?
I think I'm fortunate in that the one that is my maternal is American English, because that's the most flexible, adaptable of the three that I know, and especially of French. I believe that my writing certainly is influenced by the years of living in French. I was going to use the word, the precision that I have. I'm apt to go to dream and to be happy and to be a bit up here, and my French cerebral husband pulls me down, and it's inside me, that French. So I try to bring the two together. And it's one thing interesting about languages is when I write a dream, I dream in both languages. I don't dream in Italian. I dream in French and in English. And when I write it down without paying attention, I write it the way I dreamed it. And then I'll look at it afterwards, and some of it will be in English and some of it will be in French. So I even mix the two languages in my dreams.
That's interesting, especially that you're interested in Jung, so you're interested in dreams. So now you can add the language influence of dreams.
Yeah, right. So I believe if we have the possibility to have 2 or 3 languages, it certainly enriches our own language.
Thank you, Susan.
Right.
That's more inspiring. That's even more inspiring.
Good.
Thank you very much for that. Andrea?
Yes, sorry, I don't know how the wave hand functions in Zoom, so I'm using my real ones.
Well, it's beautifully. Yeah, you've done perfectly well. Yeah.
I hope my question will follow on from Hoda's. It's something that I'm English. I've lived in France for nearly 39 years. I was married with an Iranian. My sons speak 3 languages fluently and also 2 others less fluently. And something that I've wondered for myself and that I would like to ask Susan is to what extent, particularly connected to Jung and the personality, the influences on personality, is to what extent does she feel that I hear through the writing that the language affects how she writes. Does she feel, or has she ever noticed that it affects personality? Because I hear in my sons, and less for myself, but that's only because observing myself is sometimes more difficult, that they present differently depending on the language that they're using, given that English is their mother tongue, French is their second language, and Iranian is their father tongue. And then they have German, Italian as well. But it's, to what extent does Susan feel for herself that it has influenced herself or the personalities that she, or the roles, I suppose, if that's
My experience is so limited, Andrea, to what you are experiencing with several languages and several different cultures and East-West, not just European. My Jungian work lets me see what is essential in the language, in what somebody tells me. Even if there is, I would almost say embroidery that
Brodé.
Yeah, which is the specific language. Underneath that, there is the substance, and that substance is the same. We speak underneath the same language.
I feel that. Thank you. That goes straight to the heart. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a comment, a question to Susan?
I thought that is May has a question in the chat.
Asmahan?
Yes, but May wrote a question in chat.
Okay, thank you for that, Asman. I'll get to the chat once we're through with the direct questions. We'll give 10 minutes to the chat, because I'm sure I haven't had a chance to look at the chat myself, but I'm sure lots of things have been, comments and questions are there. Now we have Yusra. Yusra, go ahead.
Yes. Hi, thank you, Susan, for a very inspirational talk. And I wanted to ask you that once you've decided to become a full-time writer, did you decide to just have a daily routine of writing, of non-negotiable writing time, or do you just wait for inspiration? And in both cases, what motivates you to write?
I still had 3 children at home. 3 were away at university. So a full-time writer means you're still taking care of your house and your home. At first, because I had gone back to my mother tongue, literally, I couldn't stop writing. It just kept on and on and on. I would do it right in the morning. I'd write in the afternoon. I'd write at lunch, wherever, in the car. I would take children to piano lessons. I'd write at a cafe. I just had to write. It was really a compulsion. And I think it's because for so long I had been living in French and not paying attention to all of this creativity that was boiling within me. Because we all have that well of creativity and we want to dip into it. Then when things settle down, I write mostly in the morning and in the evening, and in the afternoon, I try to catch up and do what I have to do. I have a regular prayer practice every morning, and I almost always have. It's because I'm now 86 and I have less to do. It is longer. That's, I know that there's some people who, when they were 20 or 30, chose a spiritual life. So my morning now today is my prayer is silent prayer. That's my book, Circling to the Center. It's silent prayer. It's meditation. It's contemplation. It's looking at a tree. It's whatever takes me to that source of love that is within me. So my morning is prayer and reading and a bit of journaling. I don't journal every day, but it is in journaling that I discover what I'm thinking. And then in the afternoon, again, I will take care of what I need to do, and I will go to a writing project more easily in the evening.
Okay.
I do think writing is a practice. Prayer is a practice. And the more that we can make these practices part of our life, we will find it easier to tap into that well of creativity that is within us.
Let's have a look at the chat, because I think we've been missing a lot of the conversation that's going on in the chat. Let me start from the beginning. Okay. Let's see if I can come a bit lower. Okay. Omneya says, let me start with Omneya because she hasn't had a chance to talk directly. A wonderful night. Thank you, Mohammed, for this opportunity to meet your mentor. She is talking about a very rich social life. And then we have Christina. And what is Christina saying? I'm sorry, I'm trying to get it. I'm losing it. Christina is saying, I met you, Susan, when you led the American Women's Club writing workshop, and you were a great teacher and so open to all of who met there from many different origins, inspiring creativity and openness and community. And then we have Andrea. The subject of going back to mother tongue and the fear of losing it resonates for me. I often wonder if living in a different language we change our personality, and I think Andrea had a chance to elaborate more on this point. And then May said, I agree with you, Omneya. Sylvia says, I am forever grateful to Susan for giving me the right to write, which is a fantastic expression. And Sylvia, we had one of these sessions with Sylvia, and she mentioned that in that session. D.L. Nelson says, I doubt if I had not had Susan as a mentor starting in 1993, I would ever have been able to write all I have written. I would echo both Sylvia and DL's sentiments in that regard. And DL continues saying, and I am equally sure she was as well as the Geneva Writers Group gave me the tools to find publishers as well as to handle the rejections that are a part of becoming a published writer. The GWG and Susan opened a cross-cultural world that helped me grow as a writer and as a person. Thank you, Susan. May has a question, and she says, I have a question, if you please. We see in the American movies that a writer often has an assistant who helps in giving some ideas or just helping in completing the writing process. Does Susan do something like that? Susan, would you like to comment on all the questions and comments before I continue? Because there's some more. There's actually
until now, they've just been very kind messages, I think, except the one person who was talking about losing her mother tongue. And I think that mother tongue is always there, and I want that person to be reassured.
Okay.
Then there were some very nice thank yous. Maya, your question about a writer having an assistant, I think these writers are few and far between. Writing is lonely and we're alone. I have my husband who is interested, supports me, and is there. And then I have all my friends and family. I probably sometimes talk too much to my children about writing, perhaps. Don't know. Their children, several of my grandchildren are interested in writing. So I think that the seed is there. So we can go on from there. Maya, does that answer you? This question about having an assistant? I think that's for very few people.
Yeah.
So we're back to Christina, who wrote earlier. Here she's talking, she is a Jungian analyst. Do you want to, I'll let you read, Mohammed. I go back to you.
Okay. Christina says, as a Jungian analyst, I would like to say that Susan's books and workshops have not only been inspired by Jung's works, but Susan is giving back. Here too, Susan is teaching at Jungian institutes and societies, and thus has been helping workshop participants to deepen their connection with the soul. Now, this is a very interesting issue, the issue of the connection with the soul. Do you want to comment on this issue, Susan, about the connection with the soul?
Soul for me is, Jung says the soul is the self in the spiritual world. The soul is the person living in the spiritual world, the soul. I see the soul as the relationship between myself and my source. As a child, when I was sitting on my rock talking to God, soul would be what was letting me approach God. God for me now is a source of energy, a source of love. There is no longer a personification, but it is soul that takes me into that place where I feel the depth of love. So it's a relationship. Soul is a relationship. In Jungian work, it's called the anima, and it is what opens us to eros, to feeling, to relating. So if I am able to help people get in touch with their soul, I say thank you. It's a gift I have been given to be able to give to you. And in doing this, I work a great deal with what we term active imagination, asking people to imagine an image and let that imagination take them into an imaginal world which brings together the conscious and the unconscious. Soul brings together the conscious way of living and the unconscious way of living, the inner world and the outer world. So my journaling today is, I would say, is soul work. And I think in my journal, you see traces of my soul.
Fantastic. Of course, after listening to all this, Mahmoud asks how to join the Geneva Writers Group.
You can. Certainly, we have members who are not in Switzerland. You would be very welcome. So it's look it up first, perhaps the website, GenevaWritersGroup.org. All one word, GenevaWritersGroup.org. And they will give you the, I'm looking at his picture there, and they'll give you the information. We would like very much. Mohammed, you're still with us.
I'll give him the information. I can pass it on to him.
Good.
Can
I think Angela wrote it on the chat. Wrote
a comment?
the site on the chat.
Okay.
Please, a comment about the soul. Susan told us about the soul, and I wonder how can I get the relationship between myself and my source? It is very difficult, and I asked about it here. I asked here to continue to give us some hints about this points.
I would call this through, I was going to say through my prayer practice, through meditation, I address the soul. But also when I go for a walk, I do hug trees. I believe there is a world soul. Soul is in all of creation. Find where you have a feeling of warmth and depth. Is it, and start there, because afterwards you can bring all this together. It can be in nature, in a walk, in front of a sunset, or it can be when you're journaling, or it can be in prayer. Circling to the Center, my book about prayer, is really about finding that silence within, so that prayer becomes a waiting. We're there, we are waiting. Does that answer a little bit?
Thanks a lot.
Well, Asmahan, I have actually an extra copy of the book Circling to the Center, and I'll make it available to you when I see you.
I see that this DLNEL wrote about the op-ed Living in Two Languages. That's a piece that has been published and republished. I call it almost, it's a metamorphosis. I can wake up in the morning and ask myself if I'm going to, I don't do this anymore. I've become 100% American. I used to wake up in the morning and I would say, am I going to live my day as an American, or will I live it as a French person? And almost the way I dress would change. The way I answer the phone would change. If I'm being French, I would say bonjour, and if I'm American, I'd say, hi, how are you? What are you doing? I have gone back to being American, and I'm very happy that I have a French husband and the French children who are both. Voilà. But it's true. You can, I think you can live in two languages. It was harder to perhaps write in two. I made a choice.
Have we missed anything? Let me look quickly because I don't want to miss anything in the chat. Christina says,
Somebody is asking about our good friend Fauzia Assad. I wrote to her just a week ago. I do not have recent news, unfortunately, to give you about Fauzia Assad. I wish I did. We're very good friends. We international pen together. We were at Lavigny together. As Mohammed said, at this International Writers Residence, Mohammed came as a writer. That's the Lavigny, the Chateau de Lavigny. And she was still living in her house alone, but with a daughter close by, watching over her. And then you see Kathy Beigleveld here has given the website for joining GWG. She was with us today and was in the steering committee and is an active part of GWG.
Fauzia Assad actually talked to me. We spoke over the phone maybe a week or 10 days ago.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a few months ago, she broke her, she broke, I think, her leg or a hip.
Yes.
And she was home for a long time recuperating. But unfortunately now she has someone to stay with her during the days. I'm not sure if she's very mobile or not, but she was fine over the phone. She was actually thinking of coming to Egypt, and I'm not sure whether she can take the journey or not, especially now. But she was fine over the phone.
Thank you.
I was very glad to hear her voice.
we have Andrea saying that she doesn't feel lonely when she writes. Do you feel lonely when you write, Susan?
I said writing is a lonely, you have to think about lonely and solitude. Loneliness is not the same thing. I look for solitude. That's why my mornings I'm alone in my little study. And I don't think I'm lonely, but there is solitude. And so I did say writing is lonely. Let's say writing is, I don't know the adjective for solitude, is a solitary occupation.
Fantastic, fantastic. Sumaya wants to say something. Sumaya, go ahead.
I just want to thank you and thank Mrs. Susan. You really, I'm lucky tonight to attend this meeting. You really inspired me because I am a mother and I'm struggling every day to write. I adore writing, but I can't from my kids. But really tonight you give me the hope that I can start as a writer and I can be a writer maybe after many, many years. Thank you so much.
And you can and you will.
Thank you.
And one thing that I do in the book, 1 Year to a Writing Life, is that the exercises are 10-minute exercises. We don't have to write and write and write and write to get into the practice of writing. So find those little pockets, short pockets of time.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank our wise teacher and the leader, Mr. Muhammad Tawfiq, who arranged it for this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Fine. Of course, we have an interesting question from Mahmoud, who says, what is the secret to a long marriage?
I could go to the book Side by Side, where I speak about different elements of a long marriage. Let me just work with the first two. Courtship. I think that marriage, a long marriage, husband and wife keep courting one another. That courtship has to, I don't like saying has to. It is good if that courtship stays active. Just thinking, yeah, and somebody said there's an echo. I hear an echo also. I'm sorry for that. Just thinking about how to court the other, imagining that you are courting, that I can go back to when we fell in love. We were students at Grenoble and we went on a vacation, not a weekend trip to Venice, and we fell in love at Bellagio on the lake, Lago di Como, in the middle of azalea bushes. And if I bring that back, I become warmer when I see my husband in the morning. That courtship is important for a long relationship. And secondly, commitment. Courtship commitment. We have committed to making our love relationship last. And we have to remember that commitment. Commitment also as mother and father of our children. Courtship commitment. Then I talk also about celebrating. Looking within, looking without, doing things together. And during COVID, being patient with one another. No, we're fortunate not to be completely alone in our house, but the two of us, day after day after day after day, we have been sheltered. And so we need patience. I need patience.
I hope that that will be useful to Mahmoud. I think Asmahan wants to say something.
Yes, I would ask you. You told us that is 10-minute exercise every day is enough for a writer. But how it is come writing without any inspiration or without ilham? I don't know.
Writing exercises, inspiration. You can look out your window and write about what you see. You can look at a child and write about what you see. So visually, images, what you see and what you see, what you remember. You can write about something that has happened, what you are reading about. The subjects are all over. It's up to you to let them come into your imagination and onto your paper. You can do this. And then there are books that have prompts for writing. I think that in 1 Year to a Writing Life, also in Side by Side, I have prompts for journaling. Each chapter has 3 or 4 pages of writing prompts to give a subject to write about.
Thank you. Your talks is very inspirational for me. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
May asks if any of your books have been translated into Arabic. And May says she's asking because she's a translator herself.
No. Looking for Gold is in Swedish and in Italian. And now recently, Writing Toward Wholeness has just come out in French, but I don't have anything. Oh, and then in Chinese, yeah. 1 Year to a Writing Life is in Chinese and is in Korean. So the languages are a bit spread out, but I don't have anything in Arabic.
Then it's high time.
I would be very happy for that.
Yeah. I think we have to work a little bit on that. And then May is asking, is following up, how can I have permission to do that?
The person who just translated Writing Toward Wholeness, Écrire vers la plénitude, wrote to me and said, I'm an engineer. I have finished my career as an engineer. I am now translating. I appreciate greatly your book and I would like to translate it. May I? And he worked on the translation and we worked together. He would send me one chapter. It was not easy finding a publisher. We looked together in France and the publishers that we found felt that they did not have the circulation that would make it possible. So I went to my publisher for the book in English and asked, and they published it in French. And that's Chiron in America. They have published a few books in French. They have Murray Stein, a very well-known analyst, they have published in French. So we were fortunate there. So that meant that he did it on his own and we found a publisher. It's not always the case. It can be very difficult. I have somebody who wanted to publish Looking for Gold in German. She even took it to the Frankfurt Book Fair when she had finished. And she could not find a publisher. Many publishers have their own translators. But it's possible. We did it. And the one in China and the one in Korea, it's an agent in Hong Kong who did that.
Okay. So I think we have to do a little bit more work on that issue in Arabic. Now, because time is running out, I will first relay the question of Nahla, who hasn't spoken yet. And she asks if you have been following any of the writing in Arabic, any Arabic literature.
Unfortunately, no. So I have something to do.
Great. Now we have Hoda. Go ahead, Hoda.
Okay, it's just a quick wondering. You did not think of translating your own work from English to French, since you live in French most of the time?
No, it would get me very upset. I do not like.
Why?
I don't like translating. I have a daughter who translates. She does beautiful work. Translating Moliere, working with a project in New York, Moliere in the Park. I don't know if she's still listening. Lucy Tiberghien, she's kept the family name. She loves translating, and I don't. It's too cerebral, perhaps. I am more intuitive. So it is not my cup of tea to translate. But I could check what he was doing. And then, right.
Okay, thanks.
Now we are starting to run out of time. We have 5 more minutes to go. We have Wallace. Wallace's battery is starting to drop. Thank you, Wallace, for being with us. Anyone have any questions or comments?
And I have a very quick question. Second.
Please.
Susan, I read that you'll be in Paris soon. If you are, is it possible to be there, or will it just be an online thing?
No, I don't have anything for the moment in Paris. I did this fall. I was at the American Library.
Ah, missed it. Okay, thank you.
I maybe will be going back to the American Library. I have a newsletter that I send out 2 or 3 times a year. If any of you wish to get on my mailing list for the newsletter, send me an email, susan@susantiberghien.com, or you can find it also on my website, which is simply susantiberghien.com. If I could call attention to one person, Mohammed, who I see, who was very who helped me a great deal, and as I got interested in reading Jung, is Christina Ekius, who is, she's going to not want to come in, perhaps, is being very discreet, but I do want to welcome her and her husband. They are up in Stockholm, and Christina encouraged me greatly the first weekend that I spent in Einsiedeln, it was, to go see the Black Madonna. It was Christina who invited me to come spend a weekend, a Jungian weekend, and I think it was with Murray Stein. So Christina, I just want to say thank you for the help and inspiration and friendship you've given me over the years. For the moment, she's muted, but I'm happy to have called to have thanked her. And I think Christina Shalinsky is no longer with us, perhaps, but she has written.
Right. Yes, she has. She has written a few comments, I think, before she left.
Right.
But I think we're about out of time. One last word for Hala, and then we'll be wrapping it up. Please unmute, Hala. You're still muted.
I want to tell Mai, if she has a permission from Susan to translate her book, she can go to the National Center for Translation in Egypt and ask for it. And this is very good, and I can help her for that.
All right. Thank you, Hala.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, I think that's a very good idea, which I hope we will follow up on. Since our time is up, the only thing I have left to say is to thank Susan for this truly inspiring conversation, and to thank everyone who has participated. Really, it's been a fantastic evening for me. I hope you've all enjoyed it. And I hope you will stay in touch and continue to follow these conversations we have with writers from both the Arab world and the international writers. Thank you so much.
And thank you all for being there. I see you. I see many of my friends, many new friends, and now is the time for your stories. We need them today. I could add one more thing that struck me in the inauguration speech of President Biden. He said, now is the time to write, well, no, let me get it exactly. I will quote it. He wrote, "We shall write an American story of hope, not fear, of unity, not division, of light, not darkness. It does not matter whether this story be American, Egyptian, or Swiss. It's our turn to write that story of light, of hope, and of unity."
Thank you so much, Susan. Thank you all for being here tonight, and hope to see you soon again.
Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you, Amini. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.